Welcome to our lab podcast on the integument. Many of these slides that we're going to see have been shown in our lecture session, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on some of these, but once again I want to point out that these slides are taken from the histology learning system, and that link is, I believe, available on your webmic in the lab section. So let's look at some of our sections of, here we have skin. Now, I think it's very clear, even at this low magnification, that we're looking at thick skin. Principally, you see no hair follicles. You see nice reedy apparatus, your dermal and epidermal papillae. You've got a thick stratum corneum that is coming off. There you can see some of the tracks left behind by some ducts of sweat glands. You can see some of those down here, possibly. The dark layer, I'm not sure if that is granulosal layer or not. That is difficult to see if that's going to be granulosum or some artifact of stain. We can see that as we look at higher magnification. But this is going to be our spinosum, granulosum, corneum, lucidum, and granulosum is here. I'm sorry, this is basal down here. This will be dermis, papillary layer, reticular layer of dermis, and hypodermis down here. Here we can see our thick skin, our stratum corneum, extending from here all the way down. There are dermatoglyphs that we see, duct of a sweat gland. We have our stratum lucidum that's going to be in this case. Now, it's difficult to see because we have artificial separation in that region, but we also have this darker layer that you see here, sort of in the purple. That's our granulosal layer, spinosal layer. Then here we have our basal layer, and these dark granulated structures, those are going to be our melanosomes, either in keratinocytes or in our melanocytes. This inner papillary peg, that's just your epidermal papillae. So here we see a slide of one of those epidermal papillae. Again, our spinosal cells, our basal cells, and all of these dark granules are melanosomes. Most of the cells you see are the keratinocytes, and then this cell that's got the melanosomes as well, that's going to be our melanocyte. Now here we're looking more in our dermal layer. We can see, again, we've got our dermal papillae coming up, epidermal papillae coming down. We've got a duct of a sweat gland here. We've got some more ducts of glands, some muscle running through here. Here we see some muscle. These look like deflated little concentric ring structures. These are our Pacinian corpuscles. They've been sort of wiped out from the preservation, so they're kind of collapsed down in here. But that's what we're looking at, the Pacinian corpuscles. And I believe we're going to have a higher mag view of one of our corpuscles in this region. In our dermal papillae, this is where we're going to expect to see our Meissner's corpuscles, those mechanoreceptors to pressure and touch. This is a slide we saw in lecture. Nice, large Pacinian corpuscle down in our dermal layer. We've got eccrine sweat glands and ducts of eccrine sweat glands here. Believe we've got a vein that's collapsed here in our dermal layer. Now this is the high mag shot of one of those epidermal papillae projecting upward in this direction. Here is our, this is a dermal papillae projecting up, epidermal papillae projecting downward. This is another one projecting downward. And this and again, this reminds me of an elongated big mitochondria. You can see these layers inside. That is going to be our Meissner's corpuscle that you're going to see in this location. Here we have another Meissner's. In this case, we're running in this direction. So this is our dermal papillae projecting up, epidermal papillae projecting downward. So looking at other sections of skin, again, now we're going to be looking at skin. Mostly what we're seeing here is going to be hypodermis. We've got our dermal layer, and you can see very, very thick fibers. This is going to be our reticular layer. Papillary layer is way up here, and we can't really get a good look at how many layers we have in the epidermis. Take a little bit closer look at all these. All right, once again, reticular layer all over the place. We can see our papillary layer here before we get to our epidermis. Here we're getting into some eccrine sweat glands. The darker structures with the bright, prominent little white spots, those are going to be the ducts. We can see part of those ducts creeping up there. As we get closer, once again, we're seeing our epidermis. We see our stratum corneum coming off, reticular layer, papillary layer. Not much else really to talk about in this slide that we haven't already seen. Here we're seeing a close-up view of some of our eccrine sweat glands. Definitely we can see the ducts of these glands here. Ducts of the glands. We can see that stratified cuboid shape. These almost look flattened, but they're still stratified cuboid shape here. Some of the parenchyma in and around in here that we really can't see a lot of organization in lumen for. Again, more of our sweat glands, the darker ductal structures that we see. You can actually see some material in, and then our parenchyma type structures. Again, our eccrine sweat glands are going to be the most prominent sweat glands that we have in our skin. All right, a little bit different stain as we're looking. This is going to try to enhance the elastic fibers that we're going to see in our skin. Again, showing our hypodermis here, adipose tissue, reticular layer, and all of the elastic fibers that are part of our skin. Skin is very elastic with its characteristics. Here we have a nice muscular artery here. Here we've got our epidermis, papillary layer, and the reticular layer with those reticular fibers, collagens, and all of those elastic fibers present as well. Again, different stain, different view of skin. I think we can already classify that epithelium as stratified squamous, keratinized. Even at that low magnification, you're getting that good. Now we're going to look at the layering that we can see. Starting at the bottom, we have our stratum basal. Then we've got our stratum spinosum. This one's probably the easiest one. Stratum granulosum. You can see all of those granules. Then we've got stratum corneum and this lighter just rim. You can probably see a little bit. See how that's red? That's more pink here. Again, this one is hard. It's not very broad band. That's going to be lucidum right in there. Another pretty interesting stain. Again, with this, you can see a lot of the collagen fibers, adipose tissue here in the hypodermis. There we can see our reedy apparatus of our dermal and epidermal papillae, and that's just stratum corneum. Just different views, and this is really the key to being good at histology, looking at as many different samples as you possibly can find access to. Once again, looking at this, it's something that you could easily identify as thick skin, because we know that we don't have the lucidum and granulosum layer in thin skin. So we've got corneum, our squams here. Lucidum is going to be right along in here, and again, this is very difficult to pick this out, possibly from here to here, maybe not even that thick. But then this is easy. Granulosum, spinosum, and then we have basal. Most of what you're seeing here are keratinocytes. This cell is either going to be a Merkel cell or a melanocyte. And I don't really see melanosomes, that darker color around them. So I'm going to go and step out and just say we've got a Merkel cell there. And they don't name it. Well, we'll call it Merkel. Now, this is a weird looking picture. Might take you a little while to get your bearings here, but what they have done, we're used to looking at hair follicles in longitudinal section. These are hair follicles in cross section. That's why it looks like a bunch of craters on the surface of the moon. So we're going to look at these hair follicles in cross section. You possibly see some sebaceous glands, but we'll go a little bit higher mag. There we can see our hair follicles in cross section, the matrix of the hair, the follicular cells, glassy membrane is going to be out here, and then here are all of our sebaceous glands. We don't really see them necessarily attaching to hair follicles. You might can imagine an attachment there. This, I'm not exactly sure what that's attached to there. Trying to find other attachments, but most where you find a hair follicle, you're going to find the associated sebaceous glands. And again, just more cross-sectional looks. Hair follicles. And then here's our much more familiar longitudinal section. Again, hair follicles, hypodermis where we have an adipose tissue. We can even in this one see the bulb of the hair, and there is our dermal papillae projecting up. Shaft of the hair, which would mean this is going to be our internal and external root sheath that remains on the outside here. And glassy membrane, the very outermost layer of our hair follicle. We'll see more of those as we get higher and higher mag. Again, just going up in our view, here we have one of our erector pili, smooth muscle bundles, sebaceous glands here, hair follicle. See, this is the sebaceous gland. See how it really looks it's multilocular. There are multiple little vesicles in here. Those entire cells are going to break down the holocrine type of secretion, and so it really does look a lot like your brown adipose tissue. But remember, that's rare for the most part in the body, unless we're talking about fetuses and neonates. And certainly around a hair follicle, you're going to know that that's a sebaceous gland. So histology is as much of understanding relationships and positions with other structures as it is just the straight up identification because you see something that looks like something. Here we see these are repeats from our lecture, so we'll quickly go through these. Starting on the outside, we have glassy membrane, external root sheath, internal root sheath, which is going to be cuticle, then at best Huxley's and Henley's, and it's difficult to distinguish between the Huxley's and Henley's in this particular illustration. Then we get into the cuticle and our shaft of the hair, medulla inside, cortex on the outside. And there's the bulb of the hair. Again, mostly here we're just looking at the dermal papillae that we see here on the left. Glassy membrane coming down and around. External root sheath really narrows until the point you really can't see it. Internal root sheath goes away, and then we just have the regenerative part where we're mostly looking at cells that look like stratum spinosum.